Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for what is the last in our event series, Supply and Demand, which is being put together thanks to Project W, Black and Brown founders, and Stimulus. I'm Nate Erskine, Program Manager of Project W, and I'm so excited for today's event, which will be focusing on blockchain technology. Before I pass the virtual mic along to Tiffany, our moderator, I just wanted to tell you all a bit about Project W. Project W is an initiative powered by law firm Davis Ray Tremaine with a mission to provide female founders with the tools, resources, and networks they need to build and scale their companies. We have a number of accelerator programs and events and provide resources aimed at female founders of early stage companies across all industries. We don't have any open applications currently, but I'll make sure to drop our info in the chat so you guys can be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and join our mailing list to keep up to date with our happenings and any upcoming programs. So with that, I'll now pass the mic over to the incredible Tiffany Stannard. She is the founder and CEO of Stimulus, who we've had the pleasure of connecting with as she's an alumna of a past Project W program, our SaaS Launch Lab. Her company, Stimulus, is a software that helps companies optimize their supply chain and make better, more efficient purchasing decisions. And she's also the brainchild of this event series. So I'm going to pass it over to Tiffany, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Hey everyone, welcome to the last Supply and Demand event. As she mentioned, my name is Tiffany Stannard. I am the founder and CEO of Stimulus, and our goal is really to help companies use data and analytics to really build better relationships with their vendors and suppliers, and to really, optimize their supplier base, and especially diversifying their supply chain with women-owned and minority-owned businesses. So excited to have this last conversation of the year. I cannot believe it's October. This year has flew by, but the goal of the event, Supply and Demand, the real cost of doing business, is really focusing on, one of the most crucial elements to having a successful company is how to handle your supply chain. And depending on the person, it's a foreign, topic, and we really wanted to touch on this topic throughout this year and going forward to really work with women, especially because we're really never brought on to have these types of conversations when it comes to supply chains and margins and blockchain and all of that, and just having conversations about being more than women in technology, but really showcasing our thought leadership and elevating our thought leadership, and really how to navigate their supply chain issues, especially over the last 24 months, how to handle, as we're going into the holidays and closing out the year, how to build your first software product, really strategizing around that and giving you insights regardless of where you are in your business. So really excited to have this conversation. So the conversation is an hour, it goes by very quickly. Our goal is to ask as many questions as possible and then make sure that we close out with questions and then continue the conversation throughout social media, mainly posting on Twitter and LinkedIn. So excited to welcome our panel. And I'm going to allow for them to introduce themselves and their background, their business before we jump into the conversation. So we are going to start with Sophia. I think you're on mute, Sophia. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I have a double mute, my laptop and this external speaker I'm using, so apologies for that. But hopefully my voice comes out better with the speaker. So I love, Tiffany, your thought process in assembling this panel, and really excited to talk about digitalization, digital transformation, what that looks like after COVID, impact on supply chains, and how blockchain can help. So in terms of my background, I've been in enterprise IT for most of my life. I'm an engineer by training. I was at IBM for over a decade and started their blockchain platform business. And then about 4 years ago, left to start Kaleido with someone who had worked with me in the prior role. And we've helped clients with thousands of projects and networks running on blockchain. So I'm really excited to help give some advice to females founders out there. And we do work with quite a number already today where they can take their idea to fix things in a supply chain space and actually implement it. So I can talk more about that later.
Awesome, welcome. And next, Dawn.
Yeah, so thank you, Tiffany. Like Sophia said, I'm really excited to be here today too. And I'll give you a little bit more of a personal perspective from being a Brown founder as well. So, you know, like a supply chain, our audit trail is complicated, right? So I'm mixed race. My mother's pure South Asian and my father's British Caucasian. I was raised by a sweet and very supportive grandmother in Trinidad and Tobago, who wanted me to get an education that she herself could not obtain. She left school at 14, for example, in an arranged marriage. And as you know, as a girl in a religious Caribbean culture, I gained spirituality, and that's something that a lot of Black and Brown founders relate to, and also gained the warmth and the kindness that abounds in poorer communities. My grandmother taught me that it was important, especially for girls, to retain an independent spirit. For example, by example, she made me believe in myself, really. And at the age 21, I found that I was a people person. I enjoyed interacting with customers in my first job, selling computer solutions for the second largest group of companies in the Caribbean. I did well, and I was put in charge of 6 different lines of businesses, including manufacturing. But of course, the ingrained love for education had stayed with me. And so I moved to Nova Scotia, Canada, and there I obtained a master's and a PhD in computer science by age 31. And I then subsequently joined a business school, which was like, you know, going in France and living as an English person in France, and became hybrid, just from the experience of working with the business students at the master's level, etc. And so as an entrepreneur at that business school, I founded a master's degree in technology, entrepreneurship, and innovation. And then I decided I needed to go back to my entrepreneurial roots as well. And that was the first extension to it. And of course, I had raised a family in the interim. So you're looking at an older founder here, over 50. And so as an entrepreneur, I founded Peer Ledger, where I walked the talk regarding purpose and work. And so when you look at Peer Ledger, you know, one of the things I brought to that was that sense of purpose, in that, you know, you want to move the world in a new direction. So where there's a new generation of consumers who would use their wallets to ensure corporations would take better care of workers and customers and the environments they impact in that global community. And, you know, we keep being told that corporations are not citizens and thus they're not accountable. But it's up to us all to make them accountable. And this much I learned as a Caribbean resident and a British and Canadian citizen. Everyone is accountable, and corporations will do as market forces and regulations guide. So when the insight hit me that before blockchain collaboration, that there was no good solution for responsible supply chains that respect human health, are invested in the delicate balance of ecosystems, and is mindful of economic and social factors across global supply chains. That's when I realized that directing my passion and energy into making a powerful blockchain-based platform to remove opacity and the ESG challenges would be work that I would enjoy, even in the tough times around raising capital like we experience as Brown founders.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Amazing background. Wow. You covered a lot, and I love that, you know, the focus of, you know, ESG, and we had a big conversation about sustainability and supply chain during Earth Month. And we try to, you know, bring that up quite often as we are experiencing it more and more, right, over the last 24 months, and we'll continue to experience it. So thank you so much for that background. And last but not least, we have Kamal.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Tiffany, for including me, and clearly on a panel with such badass women. So it's an honor to be here. My name is Komal, and candidly, I wasn't actually supposed to be here. You know, as the only daughter of South Asian immigrant parents, I had 4 very distinct career options laid out for me from an early age, which were doctor, lawyer, engineer, or a complete failure. I always wanted to be a Bollywood actress. As you will come to find, I ended up doing something far more realistic, like solving world hunger. And my journey began when I was a student at Berkeley and I was walking down Telegraph Avenue when I encountered a homeless man who was begging for food. You know, most people beg for money, but he was begging for food. And so that really compelled me to stop and invite him to join me for lunch. And during lunch, he sat across from me, just like wolfing down his food. So he was unbelievably hungry. It wasn't a ploy for anything else. And in between bites, he shared his story. He said, "My name is John. I just came back from my second tour in Iraq. I've been waiting weeks for my military benefits to kick in. And because they haven't, you know, I haven't eaten in 3 days." And it's really at home for me. I mean, this is a veteran, someone who'd given the most selfless sacrifice for his country, only to come home to face yet another battle, that of hunger. And then adding insult to injury, right across the street, Berkeley's dining hall is throwing away thousands of pounds of perfectly edible food. And so it's this very stark reality of those who have and waste, and those who are in need and starve, and those two people literally right across the street from one another. And what I realized that this is emblematic of a much larger problem, and that's that we waste over 365 million pounds of perfectly edible food every single day. And that's not last night's pad thai or this morning's caffeine croissant, but untouched, unopened, perfectly edible food. And this costs us over $218 billion every year. And if food waste were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of methane after the US and China. So there's this massive economic cost. There's this huge environmental impact, not to mention in some of the wealthiest cities in America, including in San Francisco and in Silicon Valley, 1 in 4 don't know where their next meal is coming from. So clearly, it's not a lack of food that's the issue. Rather, it's an ineffective distribution of that food, meaning that hunger is not a scarcity problem, it's a logistics problem. And so resolving the disparity between excess food and access to that food has become my life's mission and copious purpose. And so we built a technology platform and a for-profit, for-good business that solves both hunger and food waste across America and eventually across the world.
That was beautiful. Oh my goodness, that was amazing. And you're gonna get me teary-eyed the first 14 minutes of the conversation. You ladies are amazing. And I remember, you know, watching a couple of your talks and was so excited to invite you here to speak, because it's all about logistics. You know, I worked in vendor management at different retailers for many years before, you know, becoming an entrepreneur, and they would just throw away unopened bags of chips and unopened, you know, bags of bread just cause, right? Cause I got a new shipment in. And it's just like, you know, problems that can be solved with technology, and people that need to want to solve those problems because they can be solved, right? There's plenty of food, plenty of ways to get to, you know, different folks that need it. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and amazing story. So I'm going to jump into the conversation, really just diving deep into, you know, and I got a little bit of it in your intros of like, why did you start your business? But detail more of what your software does, and how you're helping different industries, and also describe the industries that you work across, and how you're helping them. So Sophia and Dawn, please discuss, you know, how you use blockchain in your product. And Kamal, please, you know, discuss the digital footprint you offer to your customers as you're talking about not only local feeding, but, you know, feeding throughout different countries, and the importance of really digitizing that and tracking that information. So Sophia, I'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Tiffany. I guess to add a little bit of personal context, since I didn't do that, I'm also, first generation with immigrants who had come to the US for the first time, and guess can relate to a lot of people who are very entrepreneurial and have a great idea, and they're just wondering, like, how can I turn that into a viable business, and how can I really create the impact I want in the world? So Kaleido, it's a platform to make the entrepreneurs the hero of the story, and they could bring their industry knowledge, and like Kamal eloquently laid out a problem she saw that she wanted to solve. And a lot of times people struggle on, well, how do I make it real? How do I connect all the dots between this great idea around solving this really important problem, and then actually be able to create a proof of concept or a pilot that I can then bring to investors, raise money, or at least show this is real, and mobilize a whole community around how I'm trying to change the world. So that's what Kaleido provides. I mean, we work across all industries. And in terms of supply chain, which is tracking, tracing provenance of a certain good or item, that can apply in so many contexts. But just some examples of things we're doing. We have a large network of the major commodities players in the world. So 80% of the world's supply chain for grain is currently running on Kaleido. So that's an example of big corporates like Cargill, Archer Daniel Midland, and others who said, hey, we need to lower the cost of putting food on people's tables. And there's just stuff, even though we're competitors, there's stuff in the industry that creates so much waste and friction and costs. We need to come together to solve that. And we can still differentiate our businesses and all the other things we do, but we need to drive the cost down of just getting from like the wheat in the field to like cereal on someone's table. Other examples of projects running on us is sustainable tuna. So a third of the world's like tuna supply comes from the Pacific Cal region, which is a lot of indigenous people and islands, and this is a big source of income for them. And but being able to provide higher value in return for the services, in return for more trust and transparency around really sustainable practices that they're already engaging in, because they're not the big enterprise, like the huge nets that just are depleting the oceans. They use more traditional farming techniques. And then there's lots of examples around healthcare, different commodities, raw ingredients, diamonds, precious metals. Things like ESG was mentioned, carbon credits, tracking sort of the generation of renewable energy credits. We work with the World Bank is running a climate warehouse for 150 countries that runs on Kaleido. And it's really just preventing counting double spending when people are producing these renewable credits and climate assets. We're paying them collectively through these governmental organizations to actually be helping improve environmental outcomes. But when people are miscounting and misrepresenting, then we're not getting the actual societal benefit of like cleaner air, because people, it's not an immutable record of we created this asset and then it was, created the good that it was intended for. So, and there's a lot of innovation with new ideas where you're getting paid to not even pollute in the first place, which I love seeing that with some of our clients. But we, as I mentioned earlier, we do have female founders who come to us with great ideas. And it's just so rewarding to say, hey, you can start getting onto Kaleido. We have a free starter tier. So there's literally somebody who created a demo on our free starter tier, went to and raised $5 million in their particular industry problem they're solving, because they said, like, look, I know blockchain can help. Here's an example. Let me take you through it. And you could do things like tokens, et cetera, as well, which is really popular now with people talking about NFTs. You can use that in the enterprise space. So that's what they're doing. And not waste a lot of cycles on the technology, because they know the platform's there. And then their investors know, okay, you can touch it, feel it, see it, it's real. Let's give you some money to make this happen. So it's a little bit more about what we do and some of the clients we work with and how we can help some of the female founders on the call today.
That's awesome. You brought up a lot of great points. One, we probably can have a whole hour conversation on NFTs, because I know people are still learning about what that means and how to use that in their business. And I'm one of them trying to figure out and learn more about it. And then two, working with a competitor, right? Like you're competing, but you know how to kind of build a relationship to work better with each other. And part of the conversation also is, as a small company, and whether you're competing with a larger company or you're competing, especially right now, for talent, how do you best work and partner with either a larger company or a competitor to achieve a goal, especially now when we're really competing against, a lot of different things just because of, people are now working from home and hiring from different locations. So I'll have you touch on that before I get to the other ladies.
Great question. COVID definitely accelerated industries and the roadmaps for digital transformation. Everyone's working from home, so they figured we need to get together and figure this out. I think there's a number of different ways to solve the governance issue that you're mentioning. How do you get people around the table? Sometimes people form a new co and they all put money in. And now there's this new company, like the supply chain. I mentioned that with all, 80% of the world's grain, that's called Covantis. And that's a new company that they're all stakeholders in. But there are also some industry sort of associations, or they're ready more of a governance or education consortium, and they've taken approaches like an insurance with life and annuities and property and casualty in the US. That's a 100-year-old institute. They have 25 different use cases for blockchain. One was just tracking who's died in the US. Last year, that was a problem in COVID, and families weren't getting the life insurance money. And then now they're going paper certificates to the banks and funeral homes. And meanwhile, you're not even supposed to be leaving your house because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So getting to more like a digital single version of the truth when there's multiple parties involved. So there's a lot of different ways you can enter into that sort of arrangement. And I do think, just because this is a woman-centric event, women probably have more skills thinking through how do you bring parties to a table as equals, because a lot of times in a very more of like male traits, which anyone could have, male or female, but those traits are more of like one up, one down. That's the competition. If I come up with a good idea in blockchain, it's for me, it's my company. Whereas the woman, well, more naturally, this is how our brains work. It's like, how do we get everyone to the table? When, like Tiffany, if I give you a compliment and say, you are just such an amazing person, which you are, you're probably going to turn around and say, no, everyone here is amazing, because you're immediately like, bringing everyone else up with you. So that's just, I think there's a huge potential as this sort of governance problem you immediately hit on is key. How do you bring the parties to the table? That's something I think female founders have a lot of innate skills and perspectives just because of the way we normally work in business.
So true. That is something I would do. I think that's what most women do. You get a compliment, be like, oh, she looks great too. Like it's just it's like an automatic thing of feeling some sort of embarrassment in or it's like, oh, she looks good too. Like you feel weird now.
Yeah, or it's like you had an amazing business accomplishment. You're like, it was the team.
Right.
I did it with the team. Whereas, some other people, like a more male typical trait would be like, yeah, I'm pretty awesome, right? Yeah, it was all me.
Right. Well, thank you so much. All right, so we're going to jump in with the other lady. Same thing. Please give me, a description of your business, and especially Kamal, about the digital footprint that you offer to your customers and the different industries that you work in. So I'll start with it.
Sure, yeah. So just kind of like getting into what is the technology. So Copia, the way it works is Copia's technology is designed to reduce food waste and end hunger nationwide. So our food donors are twofold. They're food businesses like the Cheesecake Factory or Whole Foods, and then businesses with food, so like corporate dining halls or hospitals or football stadiums, etc. And so they use our mobile app, and they can easily request and schedule pickups of their excess food. They'll tell us, how much food they have, when do they need it picked up by, and then they post. And this hits our algorithm, and our algorithm will then match this exact amount and type of food to the nearest nonprofit that could use it at that day, that time, that quantity of food. It'll dispatch a driver nearly anywhere in the country, and the driver will pick it up, and nationwide average delivery time is 26 minutes or less. Driver picks it up, takes it to the nonprofit. Nonprofit is not just a homeless shelter, it's an after-school program for underprivileged youth, domestic abuse shelter, senior citizen home, relief center, like whole gamut of 1,300 plus different nonprofits. We operate in across 216 plus cities in the US. And then once the food is dropped off, it creates this automated digitized transaction receipt so that the food donor gets to take advantage of the tens of thousands to potentially over time, millions of dollars, the tax savings that are available to them for food that they would have otherwise had to pay to throw away. So there's financial incentive behind you doing the right thing. So that's one part of like the incentive that's behind businesses to, actually do the right thing. And so that's first part. Now, these companies, are paying us an annual subscription because we're helping them improve their bottom line. But we're also helping them further, so we've created this IRS compliant platform that enables them to receive this money and these tax savings in a seamless, secure, and audit-proof fashion. The biggest victory for the companies that we work with, as well as our planet, is when we help businesses reduce and prevent future food waste. And so this is why we've expanded our focus from food donation and food recovery to food waste prevention. And so we know that what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed. And so that's why we've created technology that makes food waste data collection easy. And so we use machine learning to provide predictive analytics that help and real-time demand forecasting to help companies reduce over-purchasing and overproduction. And so, our detailed analytics dashboard will help companies understand, well, what is being wasted and why. Is it the Indian food station? Is it the Chinese food station? Is it on Mondays that you see this huge spike in surplus? Is it on Fridays? Is it raining outside so employees didn't commute to work or fans didn't go to a game? Like, what is really driving this surplus? And so that they can get these actionable insights on, what is being wasted and why, and then getting these instant notifications when surplus spikes. So now it's this holistic food waste tracking and food donation solution that makes it easy for you to weigh and track all of your food waste. This data is compiled and analyzed, and suddenly you have full visibility into your food waste stream. So we're like this end-to-end solution. And so does this data work? So it's this type of data analytics that has enabled one of our largest healthcare systems to reduce their surplus production by over 20% in the first 6 months of working with us. So like the average hospital in this healthcare system saved over $31,000, and yet they still have over 120 pounds of food per pickup per day. So to put that into perspective, that's about 100 meals worth of food that is available per pickup every day, because food waste is inevitable, right? It's no matter how great we operate, how much technology and insight we provide, food waste is inevitable, because as a food operator, you never want to run out of food. That's the worst thing that can happen. And so what we want to do is we want to get them as close to zero, but knowing that some food waste is going to happen, we want to give them an easy, safe, reliable way to get rid of that excess food and ensure that it's benefiting the community that needs it the most. And then, the final item is that we also, want to make sure that our data is providing complete transparency. So at a glance, you can see your real-time environmental and social impact. So, where did your food go? How many people did it serve? What was your methane offset? How much water did you conserve? So you can see like up-to-date information, and then you can share it with your internal and external stakeholders. And this is something that just makes it a lot more stickier, and pre-COVID, we would also take some of these like chefs and these frontline workers to the nonprofits with us so that they could see, it's like an hour pickup, like, hey, let's take them, let's pack up their food, the excess food, and take them to a nonprofit that's, the nonprofit that we would deliver their food to, so that they could see like, hey, their food is too good to be wasted. They're feeding people and not landfills. And like, that is like winning hearts and minds. And so, of course, data is critical, and blockchain, all of this stuff is critical, but, we are still working with people. And so it's this beautiful marriage between the two that really makes this whole system work.
That's awesome. I think, so the part of the conversation we had earlier of people were kind of forced into digital transformation over the last 24 months. And I feel like so many businesses, especially big corporations, are always reactive versus proactive when it comes to, like you said, now trying to prevent waste versus just knowing that you're going to waste and, you know, kind of helping them deliver to the people that need it. But there are ways to prevent it in some way, shape, or form. Like you said, people don't like to run out of food, even if they know they bought too much. But just having that data and allowing them to track that information is so important, not only for the larger companies, but for smaller companies, because we all waste some way, shape, or form. And not only wasting food, but just anything that we're purchasing. We're constantly buying the same things over and over again. So having that data analytics and tracking that information is hopefully helping folks be more proactive than reactive, and, you know, kind of really helping, especially smaller companies that are starting, think that way going forward as well. So
Be thoughtful. And yeah, and this is all to say that Copy is more than just feeding the hungry. We want to save businesses money as we help them save the world. We're like Wonder Woman if she also had a degree in corporate accounting.
I love that. Dawn?
Absolutely. I can see the common theme across all three businesses, because, you know, the same observation is that they can't manage what they don't measure. And so it's the same thing, you know, with us on our traceability platform. We have 6 main use cases. And so we basically bundle GHG management with traceability. So the 3 use cases in the area of ESG, and I like to say we're kind of triple ESG 0, going towards, you know, zero governance events, negative governance events inside the supply chains, you know, zero child labor issues, etc., and social issues around the supply chain, and of course with the net zero around carbon. So if I take from the environment, the E part first, we've got 2 big use cases in there. One of them is around measuring carbon, Scope 3 carbon emissions, so which are in the inbound and the outbound supply chains. And of course, they tend to be really hard to measure because there's so much opacity in the supply chains. And so we remove that opacity and we give that information to the corporates. And, you know, it's a big deal now because every CEO is looking at going to net zero, that transformation. They're on that journey. And so, you know, to have better measurement tools are really important. And I think a lot of the companies in COVID, you know, got caught with their pants down around using, for example, the spend-based calculation, because everything's going up in supply chains. And so, which means that it looks, you know, artificially that there's basically emitting more carbon emissions, right? And tons of carbon emission equivalent. And so, so there, you know, obviously better way to measure is important. The fact that, you know, we still in North America have a bunch of utilities that are not reporting Scope 3. They're not measuring it, much less reporting it. And we have to make this difference in climate change, right? So for us, for the next generation, for the world, for the planet, everything. So that's one of the impactful use cases that we've specialized on our platform. So we've got pure focus on supply chain traceability and the layering of really important use cases on top of it. So that's one. Another one is around the promise of a healthy environment for everyone. So you can imagine even in retail supply chains, which I know you touch on and you advise around and so forth. You know, retailers are responsible for the stuff that they sell to us. So if there are harmful substances and etc., like we recently saw some of the fast fashion companies in the news, right? And talking about actually hazardous materials being sold for kids' raincoats and stuff like that. And so we've got a nice use case around that, where we track at that level too, track and trace. And the one that we started off on was, of course, was in social, which was around responsible sourcing. So we call ourselves a responsible supply chain company because it's not just responsible sourcing, which happens in the upstream, and it could, you know, it could be a farm, or you could be a fishery, or woodland, or a mine even, right? And even so, you know, those are the areas in developing nations where there are lots of issues and huge risks for brands. So, lots of brands have zero tolerance around child labor. And some of the brands, one of their techniques or tactics would be, well, okay, we will only buy from audited mines, let's say. So they have a little more assurance that child labor is not being used in the mines because they've got regular audits and NGOs are looking at them, etc. So, what we do with our platform is that we would put very high precision geofencing at the upstream, and we can say, okay, we know that from this area, the materials have been sourced, whether it's, like I said, fish or mica or what have you, right? And so we added another layer of control that hasn't been there before, and we capture data that's never been available before, and we give the insight into, again, this collaborative supply chain so that people can react faster. The big deal is that there are huge lags in some of this data so the compliance data in particular, getting to the right places. So some of these lags, might be up to a year long, which means that they're always reactive, never proactive. And so what we do basically is that we give them near real-time visibility. So sometimes it's at the same time it's happening, they can see what's happening. So an easy example, you're outside a geofence and you're in some wildlife sanctuary, collecting materials, right, to sell. And so it can be flagged, and they can take, alerts can go off from system, and they can take action in real time. So and that's one example in social. And then when you think about governance, we think that governance issues don't happen in North America as much as the rest of the world. They absolutely do. So I can tell you one example just from Canada, and it's very analogous to what we will see in Africa and in India and some places too. We've got, for example, raw leaf tobacco growers in Southern Ontario, and it's a regulated product. And they're smuggling from the United States raw leaf tobacco, and it comes in, and of course it's going into our Canadian processors, and so there's tax evasion happening, plus the crime of smuggling, etc. And so that's a big governance issue, and that's where again, a platform like ours can put better controls around issues like those too. And where you talk about the food waste, even the food waste application, there is an element that we can add into it, because again, sometimes, in that logistics problem, it could be in a bend, in a line, it could be, where something is happening, or it could be between 2 points. And then if you're tracking and tracing across the different points, we can add more measurements, and actually it can feed into the AI solution as well that Komal is talking to, as well, to even enrich her solution as well. Yeah. So those are some examples of what we do.
No, that's awesome. I think it also goes into kind of my next question of, all of you are doing amazing work, as a small company that's growing. And I know we spoke a little bit earlier about fundraising and really, elevating our voices. So I want to speak on what kind of fits into, what we spoke about earlier about, either working with larger companies or competing with larger companies. How are you as a company attracting and maintaining talent? Because trying to get the best talent, especially in blockchain or digital data science, is very difficult right now. It's difficult before, but it's difficult even more so now. So I want to learn about that and give those insights to folks on the call, because we're trying to create great packages. We're trying to say, hey, come work for me. We're solving these amazing, problems. And so I'm gonna start with Copia, and then we're gonna go down the line of like, how are you, maintaining your talent, growing your team, resources, are you now looking in other cities, countries for talent? Kind of speak to that.
I mean, thank you for that question. I think with the pandemic, if that's shown people anything, is that they don't have time to waste. They don't want to waste any more time doing something that doesn't speak to them and that doesn't move the needle forward. And so for us, like, there's never been a better time to join Copia, right? There's never been a better time to join an impact-driven organization. Like and because it's such a small company, you have the ability to make such a massive impact. Like, you're shipping code day one, right? Like, you're like, the changes you make are non-trivial. Not like they are. So you have the ability to make such huge impact, and I think that's just something that you have to like remind people that, you know, we are a small but mighty company. I mean, I'm a solo female founder, right? I started this by myself in college. I didn't know anything. I was so naive and so green, and, you know, we're going to feed 5 million people with incredible food that would have otherwise been wasted. So, like, never underestimate a small group of people, you know, determined to make a change. Like, that's the only thing that's ever changed the world. So, you know, we determined to rise. And so, for us, like, that's really the biggest motivation, and really showing people, like, where are we making impact? Who are we making impact to? And, you know, also now we realize, like, talent is everywhere. It's opportunity that is not, right? So we don't need to hire in the Bay Area anymore. We can hire anywhere in the country. And so that definitely opens up access to a lot more talent. And that's been really incredibly helpful, you know? So you just are able to access just so much more creativity, so much more brain power, so much more heart. And yeah, and I think that, like, there is a little bit of an entitlement sometimes when you're hiring people in the Bay Area, particularly sometimes engineers, not our engineers, but, you know, and you don't have that. And look, I mean, for us, like, the engineers that we have, they could be making so much more money. Like, you are definitely taking a pay cut, for sure. You're working sometimes twice as hard to make half as much. But, like, that is the case. Those are the, but you are working on a cause that's bigger than yourself. We are starting where we are, we're using what we have, we're doing what we can to use technology to move humanitarianism forward. Not fucking around, right? So, like, if you want to make a real change, like, this is where you do it. Yeah, you could go get a cush job at Google or Facebook, but you want to make a real dramatic change in your community, in our country, Copia is where you do it.
I love that. She about to get a bunch of resumes after this conversation. I love that. I mean, because that is so important to bring up. Like, you may not, you know, make the same amount, but you have to think about, you know, what your future at that work will be, right? And the benefit of smaller teams is more, you know, collaboration and conversation. And sometimes when companies get so big, they forget that community that they built in the early days, right? And that's the great thing about a smaller company and a startup, that, you know, in addition to, you know, the community that you build, your ideas matter, and you can, you know, you won't be micromanaged, right?
Ideas matter.
Right.
Like, our interns are shipping code. You know what I mean? Like, there's no ego. There's no, like, sense of hierarchy in such that, like, your voice doesn't matter.
Right.
And, like, also in the future, if you use this as a launching pad, that's fine. Like, you're gonna have such extreme ownership, and you're gonna grow so exponentially fast that, like, that's fine. Just, you're gonna learn so quickly. Your feedback loops are gonna be so fast that you're going to be an asset to any other company after the fact.
Awesome. So I'm asking the other ladies the same question. How are you attracting and maintaining talent I'm sure that talent has changed over the last 24 months, but best practices, especially for a small company, in addition to what she said about, obviously maybe the pay is different or, things of that nature, but really maintaining and attracting new talent to help our listeners, do so as well. So whoever wants to go next.
Yeah, sure. So we're sort of biased here because we're in a university town, and obviously we're associated with universities, but they have been a great source, and I imagine that they would be a great source anywhere in the world for great talent, university towns. And so cultivating relationships with even faculty or the programs that that are excellent programs that would produce the talent that you need is a definite tactic that small companies would use. We also grow our talent with respect to bringing in co-op students as well, and we've had great success in retaining our co-op students. And another part too is that as a startup, you give employees really interesting work, and we have leaders, basically a lot of leaders in our corporation in lots of different areas, where they've gotten chances to work on tasks that they would never work on before. And so, you talk too about the company's mission and its vision too. And when, of course, you're creating something that has impact in the ESG realm, you can create a culture around it to, a set of values as well that goes along with what you're trying to do. And so I think that's really, really important to have a unified culture into your organization. And yes, of course, no matter, people will get better opportunities from time to time, but I think we've been really fortunate. We tend not to lose people, and they tend, when I say there's definitely not a high turnover, and if they go, it's after 2 years. And so, which is, with young people these days, they're trying different things all the time. And so it's definitely possible for sure to keep good talent, to grow their talent, to retain them, to attract them, etc. Yeah. And like you said, the world's our oyster now because of all the remote work.
Right. So true.
Yeah.
And I want to close out with you, and then we're going to dive into 1 or 2 more questions before I ask the audience for any questions, and then make sure that we get a chance to close out with Sarita from Black and Brown Founders and giving any updates on all the amazing work that they're doing. They're also in a conference right now that they're doing for this week called Chroma. So I want to make sure that I touch on that, but I want to make sure that I speak to Sophie about her hiring practices and the folks that she's working with. And then we're going to close out with, the importance of all the discussion that we're seeing on supply chain. And, most recently, President Biden addressed the issues that are happening with small businesses. So want to definitely talk about what should small businesses look at and pay attention to with all of these conversations that can possibly affect their business.
Thanks, Tiffany. Yeah, I guess I'll keep my comments pretty short. And I think some of the other panelists touch upon this. Really looking at getting to know people, what they're really good at and passionate about doing, so that you can position them for success in the company, that every day, at the end of the day, they feel like they accomplished something that was meaningful for them, and the why of what they're doing is meaningful for them. So I think, we hire a lot of engineers. So I guess the answers are a little different, when you're looking at different types of people and the work they do day to day. But I think one of the keys is really just looking at it in the individual level, like person to person versus, and that's how you create the culture, versus maybe some sort of, blanket rules, or just looking at it at a very high level in theory, but then it doesn't make it to the individual who you're trying to retain in the company. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, I've been having more and more of this conversation for the last few months as we're in a process of hiring and trying to find amazing talent everywhere. I mean, we have from here in the States, in Philadelphia, to a tech team in Romania right now that we are working with. So we've been open to a lot of possibilities of growing our team. Before I go into the supply chain question, I want to touch on this to see if you ladies have had the opportunity to take advantage of these different opportunities. As we've seen the new focus of Fortune 1000 companies on diversifying their supply chains, right? By purchasing from diverse small businesses. Have you had the opportunity to actually take advantage of those opportunities over the last 12 months? Briefly touch on that before we get into the final conversations. But I just want people to kind of learn from any insights that you may have on that, especially maybe, you know, with some new customers that you have. So anyone that wants to kick that off.
Yes, so we did benefit from actually a small business government grant type thing. Not, it wasn't necessarily for females or brown or black or, you know, but when you interact with government, they always ask you, you know, for a little diversity survey as well. So absolutely, that's a thing. And you know, when we represent our business too, so over I'd say 60% of the employees in Peer Ledger are Black and brown. And we have about 40% representation female right now throughout the company too. So, you know, so we try to walk the talk as much as possible as well. We know that there are opportunities, like for example, we did get some work from a big US multinational, and they did ask the question, do you have certification for diversity? And well, at that time we didn't, but they knew that that we were one of those companies. I don't think that's the reason we got it, but you know, that was part of the process after before they issued the purchase order, that they go through with this independent firm and they look through everything, right? So anyway, so not as yet, although we know that the programs exist.
Yeah, I want to make sure that, you know, we touch on that a little bit, because I know, you know, I always feel like it's a pro and con, right, to those opportunities. The pro is, right, opportunity. The con is sometimes you're categorized as, are you working with me because you really want to work with my product or service, or you are checking a box to say you work with that woman-owned business, right? And you did a quick pilot with them. But at the end of the day, one thing I've realized, and I realized with my businesses and my partnerships and amazing people that we've been able to work with, take advantage of every opportunity that's out there and that's available, because is what you do with that opportunity and how you grow from that opportunity, whether it's that logo you can now put on your website, that initial, you know, revenue that comes from that, a beta tester for a product, just really understanding what's out there, you know, understanding people's experiences and making sure that you are, you know, passing that knowledge on to other people, because it can take your company somewhere, especially if you're, you know, building something new. I think, Sophia, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just following on Dawn's comments. We also did get a small business grant for research and blockchain interoperability. And it wasn't due to any, you know, diversity per se, that we checked the box off as a company, and, you know, like woman owned or et cetera. It would be nice if I owned more than 51%, but I do have three co-founders, so spreading the peanut butter around. But yeah, I would encourage people, do look. We just was with the National Science Foundation, and we had a kickoff 2 weeks ago, and 40% of the people who got this phase 1 grant it was first-time applicants. And the second phase 2, you can get up to $1 million. And then phase 3, I just saw a company that got $9 million. So if you have a good idea and there's some technical or commercial risk, they actually, you know, just this is a US government National Science Foundation grant, but they have funds aside to help grow the ecosystem. So.
Wow, that's amazing. $9 million. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's phase 3. We're in phase 1
right
now. But we're working towards it.
You're right there. So audience, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments or the Q&A. And then I'm gonna ask our final question before we dive into the Black and Brown founders to close us out. So as I mentioned earlier, lot of conversation, a lot of discussions in the news about supply chain, and most recently with President Biden. As a company that's, food supply chain and working in blockchain, and paying attention to what's happening, especially as we're going into the holidays and end of the year, what should small businesses and startups stay on top of or pay attention to, as a part of just, the knowledge that they need to really grow their business? So anyone that wants to start. I have Dawn start.
Okay. So do you want me to take it, Tiffany, from the perspective of our business, or generally?
Yeah, just kind of like final advice on folks just to pay attention to what's happening. It's not just buzzwords, it's important information that's being put out there. So kind of in general, as a business owner. Absolutely. I think what's helpful to female founders, brown and Black founders, and probably to a lot of females, irregardless, is that, it would be useful and likely a good tip to work with others in a group, like go on a call once a month with other women, especially connector women who focus on target on fundraising, because fundraising is one of the most important elements you can do in a startup and to be successful around, so that you have that cash flow to, realize your vision always. And so being able to connect with a group of supportive women is really important. And I think, truly progressive women will network and they'll relate. And it's like Sophia said so eloquently at the beginning, we will rise with each other's help. And I have found that to be true, that some of the most important introductions that I have made, really with true connector women. And so it's an amazing resource that we cannot underestimate. Awesome.
Thank you yourself, Tiffany.
Sophia?
Sure. I guess some advice I have, when I worked in big corporate settings and I would move around to different roles in the company, it was interesting. I noticed other people doing this, sort of hire them onto my team. You tend to bring a backpack from your old job. So at least in like the first 6 months into this new role, you're still bring a lot of ideas and perspectives from your old job. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, I guess. Often you need to just like broaden your perspective. But the analogy in the startup space, I think is relevant for everyone to think about, is founders have baggage too. So you have the stuff you're really good at doing, that's good baggage. Like, this is your talent multiplier. It's your superpower. Like, you might be an amazing storyteller. I know, Kamal, you're great. You're a very inspirational speaker. That is an amazing superpower. And then we all should do an inventory about like maybe some of the things we're not so good at that we've learned about ourselves over time, because we just don't like doing it. It's not like we could if we needed to, but it's not where we really shine, where our passion is. So like, get those people on the team with you. If you're not the wedding planner type, get someone who's like an amazing project manager and you're the big ideas person and you're inspiring people. Or you might be the one who just really knows how to maximize and get things done, but you're not the one who's just like reading industry news and thinking like a futurist, like 20 years into the future and bringing the vision forward. So just pair up with people with complementary strengths, and that brings a huge multiplier effect to whatever you're trying to do. And it makes it a lot more fun because you're doing what you really like doing, and you have people who like love being there in the trenches with you, doing what they're great at doing too.
Great advice. And last but not least, Kamal.
Yeah, so in the last minute we have left, I don't know if I have so much time to go into the supply chain warnings, but I will say to all the female founders, just kind of more general advice. So many along my journey have said, come on, Komal, eradicating hunger, dramatically reducing food waste, building a solo female-founded venture-backed company in Silicon Valley as a non-technical founder, taking leftover food and giving it to poor people and somehow making money off of that. Like, this is all impossible. To which I now respond with the words of the late and great Muhammad Ali. Possible is just a big word thrown around by small men who prefer to live in a world as it is, instead of using the power they have to challenge it, to change it, to improve it. Impossible is not a fact. It's an opinion. Impossible is temporary. Impossible is nothing. The impossible does not exist, and it can no longer exist. Like, we cannot tolerate a world in which we waste 3 times more food than there are mouths to feed. We will not tolerate it. And so, for me, so whoever you are, wherever you're from, like, Copia has a place for you. One woman can prove the impossible is nothing. One woman with a simple idea can make, a world of a difference. But it's a group of people banded together that can rid the world of one of the most unnecessary and solvable problems. The world's dumbest problem.
She about to have all the tweets, all of the quotes on that tweet right now. Back to back. I love it. I love it. So
both Sophie and Dawn said this, right? It is together we are stronger. So
yeah, I agree. Quickly, we're gonna have Sarita close us out with updates on Black and Brown founders, and then I will say our goodbyes and see you guys soon. So Sarita, are you there?
Yes, I was just like taking in all of the great insight and information that our panelists offered. So thank you to each and every one of you. I hope all of you all were taking notes, because I certainly was. And you'll likely see, we were sharing out some of the quotes, the tweetables, but please do make sure if there was anything that resonated with you, that you share that on social media as well, because we definitely believe in sharing the wealth. And so we want to make sure that information gets out. But I am Sarita Martin, Director of Marketing and Communications.
You're muted.
And it went mute. There we go. Thank you. In the event that you are not familiar with Black and Brown Founders, very briefly, essentially what we do as a nonprofit organization is provide community, education, and access to Black and Latinx entrepreneurs, and doing so that they can launch and build their tech and tech-enabled businesses with modest resources, right? So bootstrapping, essentially. And we actually have a boot camp. It's called Bootstrapping Boot Camp. And this year, we were able to do something really special through our boot camp, and that is create our Germinate Fund. And that was made possible by the Inclusive Capital Collective. So shout out to them. But essentially what we were able to do is, for those who are either enrolled or will be enrolled in our boot camp, we're cutting them their first check, right? We're essentially saying, hey, we see what you're doing. We understand that you are implementing all of these amazing things that we're teaching you. And so we are willing to give you $2,500 to $5,000. And we try to make this process very seamless, because we know what it's like to just be starting out and to trying to get your business off the ground. So if you know anyone who might benefit from that, please make sure that you tell them to visit blackandbrownfounders.com. And there they can learn more about our mission, the boot camp, all of the different events that we do that are super dope. One of which, as Tiffany mentioned, is happening now. That event is called Chroma. It's a virtual conference and community curated by Black and Brown founders to spotlight the Black and Latinx genius that is often underrepresented on tech conference stages. So we have tech entrepreneurs, investors, leaders, subject matter experts from around the world who right now are sharing their knowledge, their resources, you name it, right, with folks who are in need. So the whole focus is conversations, connections, and capital. It's running from today until Saturday, and registration is available on a rolling basis. So, we want to make sure everyone can access it. It is free, but we also have some paid options too. If you want to do a 30-day replay or an all access pass where you have access to our content, our on-demand library for an entire year, that's there as well. But you can head to chroma-21.heysummit.com, and I'll drop that link in the chat. But yeah, other than that, this, being able to see supply and demand, right? To see the series and how it has evolved over the course of 2021 in a pandemic, which, Tiffany, to your absolute credit, you had your finger on the pulse, right? Because we're in the midst of a pandemic, and supply and demand is exactly what we need to be talking about right now. And one of those problems that we need to get fixed, because I can't tell you how many Black and Latinx founders and entrepreneurs I know who are being affected by this right now. So, just hats off to you and to Project W. I'm very proud of what we were able to accomplish this year and looking forward to all that is in store, for the future. And Dawn, Sophie, Kamal, I'm just thankful that I got to learn more about your companies and looking forward to however I can support, however Black and Brown founders can help get the word out so that folks are aware. We can drive talent your way, hopefully. That would be great. But yeah, thank you all so much.
Awesome. Thank you all, ladies. Thank you to everyone that has joined the conversation. As we mentioned, this is the final Supply and Demand, the Real Cost of Doing Business webinar for 2021. And we look forward to having this conversation again in 2022 with additional partners, amazing panelists and speakers, and we'll continue to feature the amazing panelists that we've had on this event and all of our past events throughout the year, highlighting when they're hiring, highlighting new products, services, anything that you guys are doing. Excited to continue expanding the relationship. So thank you all. All right, we'll see you guys soon.
Keep crushing it, ladies.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.